Welcome back to the Insider Insight Show, folks. I'm Dr. Dave Janda. It is my privilege, pleasure, and honor to have with me someone who is a very dear friend and someone who has sacrificed his life for the freedom of every person in our country and, frankly, people of the world. For those of you not familiar with Commander Scott Snow, let me give you a brief background. Scott is well known for his over 20 years of distinguished and dedicated service as a fighter pilot, a military and operations strategist, and, if you will, a guru of situational awareness. Scott logged over 3,200 hours in fighter aircraft, over 2,000 of which were in the F-14, 618 landings on aircraft carriers, and 335 combat hours. Scott was in charge of aviation operations for all carrier groups in the Pacific and oversaw operations for the Top Gun program. It's my privilege, pleasure, and honor to welcome back Commander Scott Snow. Scott, welcome back.
Well, thank you, Doctor. Great to see and speak with you again.
Well, Happy New Year. And it's somewhat, no, not somewhat. It is a chaotic new year, needless to say. So, Scott, let's start before we go internationally and get your take from a geopolitical standpoint, because you are the guru on the international scene. Let's also start domestically. Okay, we've been seeing a lot of chaos, I believe, contrived chaos in Minnesota, specifically Minneapolis. And with all your experience in operations, I'd like your input because I've gotten a lot of heat. I have labeled what's been happening in Minneapolis as not being organic. That this is not protesting. That this, in fact, what we're seeing is the evidence of a well-organized, well-funded operation consistent with an insurgency operation. Okay, Scott. So a lot of folks are really upset with me for labeling it that. This is just a pure protest about, right and wrong, whatever. Give us your take, Scott.
Well, it's engineered chaos, Dave. That's the big thing. And to realize this is exactly how we've done color revolutions around the globe.
Mhm.
And now we're just doing it here at home. You have all the people bought, paid for, bust in, and they're even Governor Walz's daughter is helping organize this thing. I mean, and to the point, this is exactly how you build an insurgency. You have to have money,
Mhm.
and all the NGOs that are throwing money at it, funding it, busing all the people in, paid political agitators going right to the center of it. You have signal groups where they have 1,000 people on it coordinating. So they have communications, they have locations, they have scouts, they have, hey, look over here, let's, flash mob over here. It is a engineered insurgency, 100%. There's nothing organic about it.
And you mentioned the funding. It's been reported that billionaires, both foreign and domestic, along with nation groups, have actually been the funding mechanisms behind foreign governments behind this insurgency that we're seeing rear its head in Minneapolis. And in particular, it's been pointed out that there's a guy in Shanghai who's an American citizen by the name of Neville Roy Singman, who has worked closely with the Chinese Communist Party and their government. And it's been reported and documented he's funneled millions of dollars into the United States through 501s, through organizations that are prevalent in what's happening in Minneapolis. This Party for Socialism and Liberation, Democratic Socialists of America, Minnesota Immigration Rights Action Committee. He's a huge funder of all those. And that's the seed money that gets this operation going. And the question, Scott, is they want this to spread outside. They want this to be George Floyd 2.0.
Correct.
As far as I can determine, the only thing holding that back so far has been God and Mother Nature. Because if this wasn't, 20 degrees to 10 degrees below zero with a bunch of snow, if this was in August, I think we didn't be in George Floyd 2.0. Am I off?
No, you'd have the Watts riots all over again in every blue controlled city across the country. And that's what they're going for.
Yeah.
They're going for this engineered chaos, and they want, this is their Tinder. They got all the kindling down. They want Minneapolis to go first, and if that's successful, now it's going to spread across the country because they profit from chaos. That's what the billionaires do.
So Eric Schwam, who's a retired Green Beret, said the following. I like your take. As a former Special Forces warrant officer with multiple rotations running counterinsurgency operations, both hunting insurgents and trying to separate them from sympathetic populations, I've seen organized resistance up close, from Anbar to Helmand. The pattern is familiar, as you mentioned, Scott. Spotters, cutouts, dead drops, disciplined communications, role specialization, and a willingness to absorb casualties while bleeding the stronger force slowly. What's unfolding in Minneapolis right now isn't a protest. It's low-level insurgency infrastructure built by people who've clearly studied the playbook. Do you have a fault with what he said?
No, it's 100% spot on. And what as this solidifies,
Yeah.
it just makes it stronger for them to a point that now all the insurgents, the Antifa, they think that they're winning. And that, much like in a football game, they get the momentum going and they think they're winning and they have the winning message, they're going to keep going.
And they have been assisted by the bought off lamestream fake media, by local and state politicians, whether it's the mayor of Minneapolis, Fry, or the governor, Walz, or reportedly, the lieutenant governor reportedly was on some of these signal chats with these insurgents about undermining legal, lawful operations, enforcement operations. So the question is, what do we need to do, Scott? Because I'm not seeing any leadership out of the Department of Justice. I think Pam Bondi said the other day when she was asked about this, well, we sent direct quote, and I'm not quote, we sent a strongly worded letter to Governor Walz. Now, we've now sent Tom Homan, the border czar, who's a great guy, there. Is that enough to counter this insurgency?
Well, Dave, realized that every time I went into combat, I carried multiple strongly worded letters with me, just in case I got shot down and I could just hand them, here's a strongly worded letter, leave me alone, and don't torture me because, otherwise I'll give you another strongly worded letter, and it'll be all over for you.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
No, so from your standpoint, because you've seen these insurgencies up close as well, what do we need to do, Scott?
Well, I think the biggest thing, it's incitement on both sides.
Yeah.
So instead of going to roll up the child molesters, the rapists, the murderers at 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, because they know where they are, you go grab them from the back of Home Depot without making too much noise or fuss. Instead, they're right in the middle of everything. And that's, if it's 40 below and it's 4 o'clock in the morning, you think you're going to have that many, peaceful protesters, come out to get after you? And the other thing too, that I strategically to fall back the forces, reconstitute, and come up with a different game plan, I think is truthfully smart because they've been going down a road where the engineered insurgency understands the playbook and it's going to be same as it ever was. The Talking Head song. Here you go, same as it ever was, until they get a George Floyd moment.
So
And they've
change.
only had
So change
two attempts.
Change the operation. Change your mechanism of let's call them procuring, arresting these documented felons.
Absolutely. When supposedly there are 2,000 FBI agents on the ground in Minneapolis, what are they doing?
Right.
They're doing absolutely nothing. That is the federal force that is supposed to go, and they have the law behind them. Antifa was designated a terrorist
Right.
operation.
Right.
They need to go and start rolling these people up.
Right.
And to me, it's like I would go Machiavellian, where you go right to that protest, you overwhelming force, and you wrap every one of them up and ship them out of state and stick them in a prison and let them sit. Because you can hold them if it's a terrorist operation in a terrorist group, you can hold them without cause as long as you want.
Because that designation has been in place for months.
Yes. And the FBI is not doing their job.
So here we go again.
Absolutely. FBI did a great job when it's against conservatives and patriots. Look at January 6th and all the people they rolled up and stuffed in jail and just let them rot. Why not do the same on the other end? Because the Republicans don't have the stomach to do it. That's why.
Same old, same old.
Yep.
And Scott, do you find it coincidental that all of this chaos started about stopping law enforcement operations, which is stopping a law enforcement operation is significantly different than holding a protest, right?
Oh, yeah.
Give peace a chance. Do you find it a coincidence that all of this trying to stop law enforcement operations of arresting these documented criminals, do you find it coincidence that this all started when it came out about the money laundering operation to the tune of billions of dollars with the Somalis that was being then funneled to back, not just back to Somalia, but to terrorist organizations internationally? It was just a pure coincidence.
Dave, rule number one, admit nothing, deny everything, make counter accusations, create chaos. That's exactly what they're doing. And it just, yeah, it's the whole shiny keys and a flashlight. Look over here, look over here. That's what's going on.
Yeah.
And the problem being is with this administration, and God love them. I mean, it's the best that we've had so far, but it goes back to operators and administrators. And the administrators are all worried about optics. And that's the White House in general right now. It's all about the optics and not about actions and operations. If they let the operators off the leash, we would go and roll all these guys up and it would be over. But they won't let us do it.
Well, and it's not that they're hiding out, Scott, right? That they
No.
can't be found, right? I mean, every one of these cats can be found, but there's this Kyle Wagner character who calls himself the commander of Antifa in Minnesota. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, when he's not wearing a dress, and I'm not trying to be funny. I mean, he is a cross-dresser, this dude. In a video, he urged his fellow activists to show up armed and confront ICE and Border Patrol in Minnesota. And he stated, quote, "Get your effing guns." Now, this is before this whole Preddy episode occurred, right? This
Yep.
ICU nurse, as they keep trying to label him, who apparently lost his job months before because reportedly of aberrant behavior, but okay. Uh, quote, "Get your effing guns and stop these people," end quote. And the next day, the Preddy event happened. Well, Scott, why is this guy, first of all, why was he not incarcerated prior to this? Because Antifa, and he's the commander of Antifa in Minnesota. Why wasn't this guy rolled up months ago, since Antifa has been labeled a terrorist organization, domestic terrorist organization, months ago? And then after he comes out with this, he's still buzzing around.
The FBI is not doing their job. It's all about the optics. And it's also think about it too, Dave. It's part of the controlled opposition, if you will. And what hurts my head is I know the Insurrection Act is like the tactical nuke to this whole situation, where we could now throw, full on troops out there, roll everybody up, be done with it. But they don't like the optics of that. And so now it's just been sitting there simmering tit for tat back and forth. You look at, the ICU nurse who scrubbed the entire social media profile and then shows up in essentially a riot with a 9 millimeter and three magazines. It's like last time I checked it, sure you could lawfully carry it, but the moment you interfere with a police officer, you want to go do that at a traffic stop,
Right.
You're going to get two to the head.
Right. So what we need to do is if Trump called you, said, Scott, you're an operations guy, right? You're a logistics guy. You get great results. All right. So what do we need to do here? Number one, based on what you've told us, we need to change our tactics, our operation of commandeering the people that have been found to be here illegally and have criminal records and lead to their incarceration in a different manner, correct?
Yes.
And we also, based on what you've said then, need to undermine the Antifa organization because it is a domestic terrorist organization. And rather than playing patty cake with them, we need to get, I'm not going to say get rough, well, get rough, but hold them accountable for what they are and what they're doing. Fair enough?
Yeah. Well, just take a look at what they did with MS-13 when they rolled all of them up and they're all chained together, thousands of them sitting in jail. That's what you do.
That was
And
in
it,
that was in El Salvador.
correct. Yes.
Yeah,
That's exactly what you do. And you need to go after the funding.
that's right. And
And
that's the
it's
third
one
part.
it's you need to break the logistic chain. You kill the funding, you roll up the funders, and when you roll them up and throw them in prison, not a lot of people are going to step forward, from their billionaire lifestyle to keep funding stuff like this because jail food versus caviar is a little different.
So Scott, when I look at this, and this is no different than what should have happened with the George Floyd situation, the summer of love of 2020. Yet that was allowed to spread nationwide, right? So
Yep.
Scott, when I look at this, to me, it looks like a very similar response that's occurring, essentially wrong directed operations and minimal operations to no operations on the foundation of this insurgency. To me, it's a slow motion George Floyd event. And what made it slow motion was the freaking weather.
Yes. Well, and also the ability and the allowance for the governor, the mayor, and everyone to support
Right.
these riots going on. When you get ICE's job is to roll up bad perpetrators and deport them. That's it.
That's it.
They're not there for crowd control.
No.
They're not there to,
Right.
arrest protesters. They're there to do their job.
Right.
And now when they get surrounded and they call 911 and the police stand down because
Right.
they were ordered to.
That's right.
And so roll up walls, roll up the governor, roll up the mayor, roll up the lieutenant governor, roll up Waltz's daughter, perp walk every one of them.
Right.
I mean, you have enough on Waltz, to, you're Somali alone, all the fraud. When you call it a Leering Center and it rings in his office, do you think there was any kickback going that way?
And Scott, when you deal with insurgents, if you give them any leeway or latitude, it will only set an example for maybe even the crazier insurgents to act out to even a greater level. Is that a misstatement?
No, it's spot on because if you think about it, all the money goes in, they pay for legal teams as
Yeah.
well.
Right.
So they know that there are no consequences. If they get quote arrested, they're out that afternoon.
Yeah. Right.
No harm, no foul. And they'll show up and and start throwing bottles and rocks and everything else the next day.
Well, there's been a proposal that, and you're right, these organizations are laden with these attorneys that do all that do the dirty behind the scenes, is to start bringing these lawyers up on ethics charges
Absolutely.
and
Well,
and
and
trying to get
you had
them disbarred and the like.
yeah, well, you had a bunch of them that were taken off out of Maine and
Yeah,
they
that's right.
crashed and they all got smoked. But I mean,
That was,
those are the
yeah, most
exact
people don't
lawyers
know
that
about
were
that.
heading to Minneapolis.
They died in a plane crash. I think there were, what was there, like seven of them, of
Six.
some seven of the leading attorneys.
Yeah,
Uh,
from Houston.
yeah, and they went down just a couple days ago in Maine.
Yep.
So the enemy that we're facing domestically, the adversary, is funded by the globalist syndicate. Fair statement?
Correct.
It's it's the enemy that we're facing internationally as well. It's no different. It's just a different flavor, correct?
No, it's correct. And the biggest thing that people never think about is they want us fighting each other instead of fighting them.
That's right. That's right. Right. And I don't think it's just a coincidence that all this blows up on the Canadian border. One of the most high level globalists that's been out front screeching is Carney, the Prime Minister of Canada, former head of the Bank of England, no less, right? Who,
Hmm.
who, by the way, the state of Minnesota, according to Julian Assange, um, they have direct relationships with Canada and the Canadian banking system. Oh, imagine that, all that money being laundered, right? Uh, I don't think it's a coincidence that this is all happening in Minnesota, right next door to Canada.
No, agreed.
So this is from a geopolitical analyst, your take. Quote, the big guys like to play chess with the world. It's the biggest game. The bankers need ups and downs and wars to make money. The military needs wars to exist. The politicians need both to exist. End quote. Your take.
Very much so. It is one you keep coming back to the military industrial complex and wars make the bankers money. They make the politicians money. They make the military industrial complex money. And the global hegemons, you know, they make money regardless. They fund both sides.
So, Scott, let's now look internationally. We just had this operation in Venezuela. Okay. Give us your take because we have I don't know what kind of version you want to call it, rainbows and lollipops version of, well, the Russian S-400 systems that were there for anti-aircraft. Well, they're lousy. They don't work. And that enabled us to get in there, and we just got in and got out and got Maduro and got his wife, and it was just absolutely flawless operation and absolute. So, Scott, what's your take of what happened there?
Uh, Basically, you sprinkle money all on top. So instead of like dropping leaflets, you drop money. And suddenly, when surface to air radars don't work if they don't get turned on. And when they know it's coming, and it's here's you can be a smoking hole, or here's $10 million, go have a good life with your family. Hmm, I may go with the 10 million
Yeah, right.
and leave the machine turned off. And that was how, they prepped the battlefield,
Mhm.
so to speak, financially before we even thought about going in. And so essentially an inside job was paid for, and Maduro cut a deal.
Mhm.
I've never seen, if you and I were a president and we got snatched from our country, we'd be walking down the hallway and taking selfies with the people on the way. No, I think there'd be at least a little bit of a sad face, but he knows he's going on to a better life and a story.
So is it safe to say, because I got heat for this as well when I said this, that this was when Maduro and his wife were removed, we removed somebody who previously had deep state ties, a deep state player with a regime that was loyal to the syndicate, but ultimately he had cut a deal prior to the extraction. And in fact, another way to look at this extraction of Maduro was removing and extracting a federal witness who will be potentially used to bring light on issues related to election fraud, immigration invasion, drug and money laundering that had ties to the United States government, the previous administration, if you will, and NGOs. Is that an overstatement?
No, that is 100% spot on. And it's one, realize that most of the drug traffic and the cartels are run by a certain three-letter agency.
Yes.
And that's where all their dark money comes from. It's never on the books, it's never budgeted, and they get to do with it exactly what they want to do with it. And now you do the same thing with Venezuela, and that money gets laundered and siphoned back into the pockets of those that allow it to happen.
So this was not only, quote, an attack on Venezuela, it was actually also an attack on our own intelligence agency, including MI6 and Mossad, that have been very active in
Mhm.
Venezuela on the money side, the drug side, the human trafficking side. Fair statement?
Correct, yes.
And there was also the added benefit of claiming their natural resources, not just the oil, but they have a huge mineral arc there, a gold, silver, copper, and rare earths. Added benefit.
Yes. Well, and as we've spoken of before, to me, this is part of, you know, Trump, Xi, Putin, and the sod sitting down and cutting up the pie.
That's
It's
right.
like, we're going to take North and South America. Any questions? All right. China, you get Asia, Russia, you can have everything. If you want Western Europe, you can have that too. But, wait till it implodes on its own because it's well on its way. And there we have it.
They are cutting up the pie, this fear-based international order.
Yep. It's to me the biggest thing, Dave, that we see. These are the birthing pains of going from a unipolar to a multipolar world.
Mhm. Which brings us to Greenland, right? Everybody's like, Greenland? Well, there's a strategic component to Greenland, correct? And it's also part of this sphere-based, right? Sphere-based international order. In fact, Putin said, I can understand why the United States, Trump wants to include, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
right? I mean, Putin's saying this, right? Meanwhile, you got all these other people, hair on fire, screaming, oh, this is, but this has already been determined, hasn't it, Scott, at the table with Putin, Xi, and Trump?
Yes. Well, look at Denmark and the politicians as they're walking out after the meeting,
Yeah.
and they're all like sad face. It's like, yeah, it's over.
Right.
So it's a matter of time. And it to me, it comes down to dollars and cents. And just think of how much money Denmark pours into Greenland to keep it going and afloat. And if you thought our, social welfare system was, rough, imagine if you had a minuscule GDP and now you're trying to float an entire country.
So, Scott, going with this sphere-based international order that you've articulated a number of times, which I believe is right on target. Um, so, based on what we're seeing with the Donroe Doctrine in this Western Hemisphere, and Venezuela is now, under your guidance, so now is part of Greenland and the like. Can we anticipate that if we look at a different sphere, that part of this sphere deal was okay, Putin goes, all right, and my part of this is I'm going to get what I want in Ukraine. There aren't
Mhm.
going to be any NATO troops there. And you know what? I am going to let Western Europe dangle in the breeze. What I'm going to do is end up using them to sell them natural gas and oil. Is that so can we anticipate a resolution to the Ukraine issue here in the very near future based on what's happening in Venezuela and these other parts of the sphere?
Yes, absolutely.
And what about in the Far East? So if that's Xi's part of the pie or part of the pig, can we then anticipate that what Xi said is, yeah, I'll take the Far East and Taiwan?
Yep. And Taiwan's going to get assimilated from within. I really doubt that that will go kinetic.
Interesting. So the people they have on the ground there, let's call it an insurgency,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
Right?
A
Will
polite insurgency because the Asians are very, very polite.
right. So will you will see this transfer kind of Hong Kong-esque, only faster.
Correct.
Okay. So with that being the case, it's interesting that just this past week kind of flew underneath the radar of a lot of folks. Um, Lutnick, globalist, Secretary of Commerce, came out and said, "Yeah, Taiwan has decided that they're going to spend $500 billion in the United States and move their semiconductor industry onshore in the United States." Scott, that was, I think, part of the deal.
Absolutely.
Where Trump said, gee, yeah, okay, you can have Taiwan. Okay. But, they got a lot of semiconductors there. So how about this? Some of it can sit back there, but let's onshore some of this back to the United States. So can you just hold off for about a year or 6 months while we start onshoring this back? Scott, I believe that's what that announcement was all about.
Oh, absolutely. Well, Dave, look at it this way. This is the unraveling of the offshoring for all the manufacturing from the 1950s forward that we gave over to China, and now we're onshoring it all back. Each one is going to be self-sufficient. China's going to be self-sufficient. Russia's going to be self-sufficient. The United States is going to be self-sufficient
In
for
this
North and South
multipolar
America
in this
in
multipolar world
multipolar
that
world.
you speak.
Absolutely.
Right. All right. So now let's talk Middle East, right? Where is the Middle East in all of this? Now, at the Davos meeting, they Trump unrolled this peace board, right? That I think inflamed Netanyahu and the rest of them, right? A lot of people in the Middle East because peace. That's not synonymous with the Middle East. I mean, that's been the globalist playground for chaos. Well, now he invited Putin to be on it, right? The Pope to be on it. Everybody's on. And then right now we got some carrier groups that are either positioned near the Middle East, potentially for an attack on Iran, and another. Oh, I think the Lincoln on the way there, but almost there or there. You see a lot of strata tankers, the refuelers heading over, like we saw prior to the June hit in Iran. Where are we in the Middle East, Scott? What do you think's gonna? I mean, because we're talking about this before any attack or any hit occurred.
Last time.
Yeah, since June.
Yep. I think we're gearing up for another round at BB's request, and that bothers me. To me, like one of the only sane people in the Middle East is MBS in Saudi Arabia, and the rest is a mess and always will be until you need to get to a point where you keep Israel and their goal of greater Israel, take that off the table because it foments war, strife, and it will never stop.
So at the table with Putin, Xi, and Trump, when they get to the Middle East, how do you think that conversation went?
I think it's one where they look at it of, okay, you guys take care of Iran and keep them in their box. We'll keep Israel in their box. We'll keep the oil flowing out of the Middle East for you, China, because that's where all their oil and gas is coming from. And it's make it an economic agreement where they can all prosper instead of tearing it up and now nobody wins. They flip the Scrabble table over and the game's over.
But if we end up doing BB's bidding yet again, which has happened time and time again, whether it's the first attack in Iran or Iraq or Afghanistan or Syria or whatever it might be, right? I mean, we've been doing BB's bidding for decades. Fair statement?
Correct.
Okay. So if we actually do a second attack, what are we going to attack? I mean, are we going to attack? Because, Scott, we were told their nuclear facilities were decimated. Okay, we're going to attack the decimated nuclear facilities again? What's the premise for the attack? That they're reconstituting the nuclear? But wait a minute, you said that,
It
not
was
you.
already done.
He said in June this thing was they can't rebuild this stuff for decades. Well, so what are we going to attack?
At that point, they're going after infrastructure, and they want to take the missile capabilities and the nuclear capabilities out of Iran's hands. And I get that, but we had a saying in Afghanistan. It's like, oh, we're going to bomb them back to the Stone Age. It's like, dude, they're already in the Stone Age. I mean, we'd have to build them up before we bomb them back to it. We've been so tough on Iran with sanctions and everything else.
Right.
Why not, you know, stick and carrot and stick approach, where you help build their, economy back to life, give their citizens a better life, and move on down the road. Instead, the austerity and running them into the ground economically, that's what causes a lot of hate and discontent.
And when there were these quote protests, what appeared to be fomented through our intelligence agencies and Israel and Mossad, and that ended, um, the the feeling was that there was going to be an imminent attack right then, and Trump made it look that way. And in the process, because it went so far down the pipe, and reportedly he pulled back at the last minute, it exposed the operatives working for our intelligence agencies and Israel, which ultimately that led them to be rounded up, if you will, right? And
Hmm.
it also exposed Iran and their emergency operations. So essentially, by doing that last minute pullback, it gave Trump leverage on both sides. We now know their emergency operations they have put in place since June, and and the underlying infrastructure to bring down the Iranian regime has essentially been cordoned off, right? Because they started their operations. So that being the case, one would think, okay, that was discussed at the table, right? The three of Putin, Xi, and Trump. But the question is, if we're pre-positioning to let it fly, was that discussed at the table? And if it wasn't, and we're just doing this to pacify Bibi, whose corruption trial keeps getting postponed, and the judge recently died in a freak accident,
Hmm.
uh, is is doing that attack going to lead to flipping over the table as far as Xi and Putin are concerned?
I think it might, and it's one where I to put a carrier battle group out there. We've had carrier battle groups in the you know Gulf of Arabia for decades upon decades, and there was many times it would go between a single carrier presence to a two carrier presence, and then back to a single carrier presence, and it's been quiet for a while. So I'd see bringing one over there twofold for me. It is okay, and this is on the Putin and G side. It's like, okay, well, if you guys want to play, we're going to sink the Abraham Lincoln, and now what?
Which they could do with hypersonics very easily.
Oh, absolutely, yes,
And Iran has hypersonics.
yes, they do.
And when all these protests were going on, I think half a dozen at least of these huge cargo planes from China landed in Tehran. And within 24 hours of them landing, all of a sudden, hey, the protests are off, right? So
Yep,
obviously, China brought in either personnel, maybe both personnel in these planes, and military equipment, and let them know what exactly military equipment was coming in, where everybody decided, well, why don't we just kind of relax for a little bit?
yep.
What could they have brought in, Scott, to calm things, let's say calm things down from going kinetic? What could have the Chinese sent there that would have made, if Trump cut a deal with Bibi to do some kind of limited hit, what what could they have brought in that made him go, you know what? No, not today.
Yeah, I think more surface to air systems,
Mhm.
definitely. Think that and essentially, crack combat troops that are just going to quell any, you can only, a paid protester agitator is only going to fight so hard.
So Scott, let's conclude with this. If we look at this, are we is the world from a kinetic military standpoint um, more secure today because of this splitting up of the pie, splitting up of the pig, cutting up of the pig, if you will, than we were 2 years ago?
I would say yes, absolutely. And I think part of it and part of the deal was, look, the petrodollar is no more.
Yeah.
And you have the BRICS nations, and we're going to allow you, and China now won't, sell any silver or gold except through their 44 dealers, and they have to get government approval before anything goes out. I think you're going to see an entire monetary shift throughout the globe, where you're going to have the BRICS that is going to be a gold-backed, commodity-based uh, dollar, so to speak, or unit. And then, you will see the dollar is going to get revalued,
Mhm.
gold's going to get revalued, silver's going to get revalued, and there's going to be a change in the system on our end too.
So the geopolitics and the geo financial world are actually all in the same sphere. They're not separate circles with a little bit of intersection. They're actually right on top of each other.
It's all intertwined.
Right.
Absolutely.
And it ends up being a multipolar world with a reset a financial system that is based on hard assets rather than paper vapor currencies created by a globalist syndicate.
That is correct.
And so, Scott, is it safe to say that all these people that are saying, oh, gold's in a bubble, silver's in a bubble, they don't get it. They don't get it strategically. They don't understand what's really going on because gold and silver and hard assets are becoming the foundation of a new economic financial system worldwide.
Absolutely. Fiat money always hyperinflates and dies. Go back to the Roman Empire.
Right.
How did Rome fall? They started devaluing their currency. They started taking silver out of the coins
Yeah, shaving them.
and shaving it.
Mhm.
And what did we do? 1964 and forward. No more silver in the coins.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
And then we had
71 come off the
71,
go.
yeah, 71 with Nixon, right? No more.
Yep. And now we can print ad nauseum and be the big power around the globe, pay for Vietnam, pay for all the wars moving forward. You got 14 different printing presses that'll crank out money as much as you want. And that's coming to a close.
So recently, President Trump was in Iowa. And before he spoke, someone said, the dollar went down today a lot. And Trump said, oh, I think the dollar's doing just fine. And everybody's like, what? I mean, you want the dollar to appreciate. He goes, and he was, no, I think the dollar's doing just great because it was part of the deal, correct?
Yep.
Part of the establishment of this multipolar new economic system that essentially leaves the globalists in the cold, which is why they were so stinking upset in Davos this year. Fair statement?
Oh, absolutely. That was if he could have, you know, brought Ricky Gervais out to do the same speech, it
Right.
was almost exactly the same as
Right.
his
Yeah.
Grammys or Oscar speech that he did when he's just hammering them.
Yeah.
And
Get
that's the way
over
it should be.
yourselves. You're over. You're done. You're nothing.
Yep.
Right? So all we have to do, what we really have to, so the only spanner in all this who could really upset things would be Netanyahu, who is globalist directed, trying to flip over the table in the Middle East that could upset the apple cart enough where it could potentially, which is what the syndicate wants, I believe, spin out of control, go nuclear.
Exactly. That's the last wild card they have to play before they bring out the UFOs.
Well, there was talk about the UFO thing, right?
Oh yeah, that's one of their last cards that they get to play.
So if they did that, if they pulled out that card, how's the public gonna read that, do you think?
Well, you look at one of the biggest drivers of a herd is fear. So you
Yeah.
look at you have one sheepdog and you have 100 sheep, and every sheep thinks that that dog's going to eat me, and so they all move in the direction.
Right.
So now you do that with UFOs slash aliens, things that people can't comprehend or understand or critically think about, and they're like, "Oh, government save me," and there's the fear, and you drive them all in the direction the government wants them to go.
So, Scott, is it safe to say, I just want to do a little brief thing on UFOs, if that's okay. Um, Many of the entities that are called UFOs are actually uh, military assets of the future of a particular country. Is that a fair statement, you think?
Oh, absolutely. Well, look at it this way, Dave. So if, say, Lockheed Martin, brought out, hey, I've got this anti-gravitational craft that now completely nullifies their bread and butter, which is selling F-35s. They're iron brokers. They basically cut off their entire funding source and revenue stream because they brought something to the table that was so light years ahead of and trumps everything else that's out there.
Scott, how when you add it all up over all your years in a fighter, in an aircraft, not since you retired, how many hours have you logged, do you believe? Flight hours.
About 12,500.
Okay. And in all of those 12,500 hours, right? Have you ever been in a flight, on a flight, and seen something where you go, uh, I call that a UFO?
I've seen enough things that couldn't really be explained away,
Uh-huh.
but also one of those where I'm not up close and personal with it.
Yeah.
But then in other parts of my job, when you learn it, we have certain airspace that turns on in the dark of night, and that's usually when we go fly these things. So it's one where they clear out the airspace so that you don't have a close encounter, so to speak.
So, in COVID, they created something and then moved to create a lot of fear about it, right?
Mhm.
To harness a worldwide population. So, is it safe to say that they could do the same thing with the UFO issue?
Absolutely.
And
It,
it's
it's
that, and that's their end game when they're going down the tube. The last, as they're drowning in this whirlpool, the globalists, the last hand they're going to put up has UFO on it.
yes, because it's something that people don't understand. They can't readily see it, and that's what incites the fear. Think about it from COVID. Could you see COVID? Did they ever isolate what the COVID virus was? No. It's all, the flu disappeared that year. That's weird.
Yeah, right. Yeah, there were four
Yeah.
cases. There were four. No,
Four cases of
seriously.
the
I mean,
flu,
it
they
was
drove
no,
like
seriously.
45,000.
Across the country, it was some ridiculous number. It was
Yeah.
like 100 and what 21 cases of the flu. What?
Yeah.
All right, Scott. So, in a different way, things are looking up.
True.
It's just that we have to harness the death throes of the globalist syndicate and what they wanted to create with their new world order. And as it's failing, we just have to keep that contained. And we're seeing the death throes in Minneapolis of the globalist syndicate. We're seeing the death throes in trying to foment war in the Middle East.
That's it. Stay on the path forward.
Scott, what's the most effective way for folks to follow you?
Well, they can find me, Flake Fighter on X, as well as if they want to look at any of my airplane stuff, I have MCS Sky uh, as my aircraft management company, and Merit Air, which is our FBO here in beautiful Bernie, Texas. And drop me a line on X, and we'll chat.
Commander Scott Snow, I'd like to thank you for everything you have done, are doing, and will do. Thank you, folks, for joining us. Until next time, Dave Janda signing off. Dream big and dare to fail. Thanks for your time today.